So I'm Joe Mayo with Malum Architects. In just a second, I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker here for lunch. I love all the conversation that's been going on about mass timber and thinking about sustainable materials and how we can transform architecture here in the Pacific Northwest and Washington State. Even the way we build, the way we design, down to even the way materials are manufactured. If we go way back in time, if we go way back in time when we first came to timber as a construction medium, we did so out of necessity. There was no other materials like concrete or steel. However, in modern times, we've largely turned away from wood, especially for our larger buildings or buildings of great importance. So why now are we reconsidering its use? How should we think about timber in the 21st century? Are we at a point now where it just makes sense to use wood, even for projects at a large scale? Our keynote speaker, Matthias, Senior Associate of the DLR Group, is going to talk to us about that in his presentation today, titled The Architecture of Life, Mass Timber Design That Benefits the Human Body. Matthias is a German-American designer and architect. He recently has led design for the Seattle Mass Timber Tower and a mass timber construction typology study in Silicon Valley. Examples of his work include a 65-story tower in a mixed-use tower in Vietnam and a 39-story tower in China. Please join me in welcoming Matthias.
Thank you. What? Did you know that touching wood induces physiological relaxation? In a Japanese study, it has been proven that upon touching wood, your oxyhemoglobin levels will go down by 50% after 90 seconds of human touch. Oxyhemoglobin is a stress indicator. It's a protein in the prefrontal cortices of your brain. It is being released. It has been 7 million years since humans became humans. And over this entire time, we have been living in natural environments. When we come to a place of nature, we automatically feel good because we originate from nature. When we design environments, we draw from the characteristics and the archetypes that those environments offer to define what architecture can deliver. I'm Matthias Old. I'm an architect. I'm a design leader at DLR Group, and this is my playlist. I'm going to take a look together with you at the spirituality, the concept of transcendence. We're going to take a look at the Eastern and Western perspectives. We will take a look at the underlying science, and I will conclude with a few case studies. Le Corbusier was a painter, was a sculptor, was an architect of the last century, 100 years ago. And he was known in the architectural scene as one of the guys, as the pioneer who introduced what's called today modern architecture. He said the business of architecture is to establish an emotional connection by means of raw materials. So a few questions come up. First question is, why is it that I prefer a certain place over another? How do these places amplify or not my ability to perform? And then lastly, what can architecture do to enhance performance, to enhance well-being, to enhance the bodily functions. Before we go there, or as we go there, we'll take a look at what you know as Psychology 101, Maslow's pyramid of needs, or hierarchy of needs. Understanding that there is a base need that we all need. We need food, shelter, water, air to breathe. And as we go progressively up, there are emotional needs, such as love. As we go further up, we go all the way up to self-transcendence. Self-transcendence as in full esteem, super blow, super confidence, level of flow, nothing can disturb me, I'm focused and at my maximum peak capacity and ability to perform. That is self-transcendence. In order for self-transcendence to occur, all those others need to have occurred or need to be agreed on as the baseline. If we follow that further, the key question then is, what can architecture do in order to infuse and embellish and actually catapult us to those moments in life, and you know what I'm talking about. Maslow has a description, has descriptors. This is, of course, difficult to put into words, but some of those descriptors are here. Effortlessness of functioning, the sense of the presence, the here and the now, the gratitude, the acceptance, the humility, and a overall self-determination as we are going through our lives. In contemporary architecture and design, in our societies, we are pretty good at the physiological and the psychological aspects of things. We can organize space, we can set an overall mood, we can pull the materials in that are available to us, and we get the base, the status quo done. And all of you are in the room here to get above that status quo because we know there is better and we know we can do. A brief look at other cultures that I practiced in. So here in the example of India, we have Buddhism. One of the key concepts of Buddhism is the acceptance of impermanent state of minds or states. So the acceptance that things change, that what I'm telling you now can be blown out by the next person coming up on stage, and being accepting to that kind of momentum that life offers. In China, we have Taoism, where the concept is that nothing can be really forced. If I want to bring you along, I cannot just push a presentation out to you. I need to have you a chance to see yourselves and to grow with it, and this needs to come from within. And this is what, in the context of CLT, mass timber, sustainable design, practices that we all live and breathe anyways. But the understanding that this comes from within, it grows from within, and there's an overall give and take and a balance, what is also called the yin and yang that you are most familiar with. If I go to the Japanese, and I practiced for a Japanese architect, what I learned there was that there's actually an appreciation of things that do not line up. And not because we like quirkiness, but because if proportion and composition work in favor, there is a higher level of beauty in a state of a design or of an object that alludes and suggests and discloses some imperfections and, again, some incompleteness from within. It is called Wabi-Sabi. Our word would be rustic, but that's not really hitting it, as you can imagine. What we are labeling this and what we are terming this in the US is biophilia. So biophilia, the love of living systems, which was first introduced by Erich Fromm in 1964. 20 years later, we had Edward Wilson who came out with his book and with his hypothesis, the biophilia hypothesis, in 1984. It was coincidentally also the same year that Roger Ulrich put out a breakthrough report that I'm sure everyone has heard of ever since. It was the underlying analysis and findings and facts that the recovery time of patients in a hospital room with a window of nature is shorter than the recovery time of a patient with a window against a brick wall or territorial views. That has since then, since '84, shaken up and really altered the way modern healthcare design works, not only in America, but throughout the world. I'm telling you this because there are lessons to be learned within those explorations for our industry. In our industry, biophilia has become very hip and trendy. It's a term that is being blown into almost every other design presentation for lack of words, and I don't mean this facetiously. It is a difficult and tricky thing to talk about compellingly, which is why we're talking about this. And I might have. No, here we go. So I'm going to review briefly with you the 14 principles of biophilia that were published in 2014 by Terrapin Bright Green. And all of those, and we're going to go through them in rapid succession because you know them. And we're going to review them with the understanding that if we are able as a community to reduce stress, in order to boost our creativity, in order to enhance our attention spans, in order to improve our well-being, if we manage this by accepting a few of those, then we are on the right track. The first one, New York Times, main office lobby, New York. This is the type of environment that people walk into. That is the view connection of nature. It is the haptic experience, the ability of touch, that was just demonstrated here. It is the sensation of powers around me that I might not see, like here wind over a metal mesh that drapes a parking structure, an installation here by Ned Karn, the artist and sculptor. It is the understanding that the sensation of wind flows, of air movements, have impact on my ability to feel well and to perform well. The impact of audio and visual sensations that I have as a function of water being present. The ability to observe light over the course of the day through a room in both diffuse and hard lights, and the rejuvenation that those moments in life, in your daily lives, have on you or not. It is, in the example here of Petronas University, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, the understanding that if I can design a building for us that fully embraces nature, I'm living inside out, it is apparent, there are transparencies built within, view connections, the balconies pop out, shading is given. If I can design toward that high standard, I am designing toward what we should be designing in 2020. Understanding of fractals in the way we experience things around us and how those impact us. The very material, the rawness of the materials, the complexities of those materials and how those inspire. The ability to see a horizon line, the understanding that if I sit at my office desk and am able to see a horizon, I know where to go. I have a direction. The opposite is true. I, at times of a day, need solitude, need privacy, need security, need safety, and I'm looking for refuge. I'm looking for places where not everything is really just disclosed at once, but where there's an aspect of mystery that generates curiosity. There is the aspect of risk-taking throughout my life. And the very fact that moments in life where you take a risk will set you up for the next one. And without it, your life is flat. The underlying science, you ask? We'll take a look at it. So all those 14 principles of biophilia we just looked at, they are illegibly here portrayed on a table and another table. And this is just to demonstrate to you that on the left-hand side, to all of those categories that we just looked at, 14 categories, for each one of those, there are white papers that have been published, not by designers, but by scientists. And there is hard data available, and we'll take a look at a few of those. So in this example here by a University of Toronto faculty member, Oshin Bhatarnian, he demonstrated that there is a difference in our appreciation of Singer's curvilinear form and straight linear square form. And you can see in the delta between black and white, black for beauty, white for not so beautiful, you can see in the difference of the delta that there is a tendency to judge curvilinear shapes more beautiful than rectilinear shapes. The example we just opened here with was the touch on wood. In this example, subjects placed their hand on 4 different types of materials. Wood is the orange line, the bottom line. The measurable is oxyhemoglobin, that's the protein that's measured. And you can see that the oxyhemoglobin release over 90 seconds is not only lowest, but stays low, as compared to tile, marble, steel. And this is not what you want wood to be, what you want your business case to be. This is what your body tells you the business case is. A study along the same lines, the same parameter was measured, oxyhemoglobin in your bloodstream. The person in the center dealing with green plants, touching green plants. The person, same person in C, the same flower pots without the plants. And you can see in green that the oxyhemoglobin release over the testing period was substantially lower than just dealing with styrofoam cups. And by substantially, 0.5 versus 1.75. There are a series of tests, and this is one of them where in A we have a control situation, in B looking at a metal wall, in C at a wood wall. And these are Pmx tests. So Pmx are qualitative tests used in psychology. And you can see here that in the upper square, the values for depression, fatigue, tension are in the negative. They are not being experienced relatively. Vigor, look at vigor. Vigor is up by 0.8. Vigor is down by 2.5. Similar study here. So the question was, how does cortisol change in your body, and how does your heart rate changes in your body if you have middle oak furniture, right walnut furniture against your control case? The lower graph is the wood graph combined, and it shows you that the cortisol levels are significantly below. And just as a reminder for what cortisol does, it manages your metabolism. It manages your sleep-wake cycle. It regulates everything from blood sugar to blood flow to cognitive functioning. So it's a pretty important measurable, we can all agree. And during this test, stresses were imposed at 15 minutes and at 45 minutes, and you can correlate the results yourselves. But what is a key takeaway here is if you look at the progression of wood starting point at 4 for cortisol, going down to 3. If you look at the control material, 6.5 starting point, going up to 8. Overall, oak and wood, oak and walnut were then further compared, and this is just to say that 77% of those tested had a positive response for walnut, where 60%, for oak, 77 oak, 60 walnut, suggesting that there are still some nuances in the way how we compute the texture and the color that's in front of us. For the same test, heart rate was measured. You can see in black here the treated wood line, and in gray above it the control material. And of all of those studies, one of those key takeaways is that, yes, okay, it's another slide that shows how favorable wood is and how wonderful. But if you imagine oxyhemoglobin, the stress indicator in your brain, your heart rate, your cortisol levels in your bloodstream, if all of those are being positively affected in the sense that they're being brought down, and you multiply this over your personal lifetime, there are implications that are clear and obvious ahead of us. A study 2014 by David Fell of FP Innovations that was heavily publicized here. So white control room and a wooden interior, and the measurable this time was your sweat. So the more nervous you are, the more you sweat on your palms, on your foot soles, and the more you sweat, the more electricity and current can be measured. And there's a baseline, ramp up, there's a stressful test, there's a recovery time. And what you see here, green, the wooden interior, the wooden office, and black, the non-wooden office, you can see that it starts low relatively, stays low relatively, and ends low. And this is important because, as we know, sweat and anxiety in a performance mode at work, they will affect my brain in a sense of my brain going into a fight or flight mechanism, and fight or flight is not good as it blocks and inhibits our brain functions. And this went all the way up to Google. So Google is one of our clients. Google last year in Milan at the Biennale had this fancy wristband here that they donned all participants in the room and led them through 4 different distinctly designed interior spaces. And what they measured was heart rate, breathing rate, skin conductance relative to body motion. And this is to tell you that there's an entire industry in our region, the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Microsofts, the F5s, all of them try to get their head around what to do and how to position and where to go next. So where we do go next, these are examples of Europe, of Asia, of Australia, and North America, of course, of designs that seek to embrace nature, either from a direct or in a direct or indirect way, that try to figure out how to either work along the lines of more natural systems in a building, or how to literally use wood on buildings. I am from a generation that identifies as Gen X in the second column here. If I look around the room, I might not be so off with you as audience. For us, what was important at some point in our life was materialism and competitive strife and individualism and status, brands, and luxury overall. Those were the wouldn't it be great if kind of things. And that is rapidly changing. If you look at your children, at your kids, at teenagers around, you know that they click very differently. They don't care about cars that much, as an example. They are fully community-based and driven and oriented. They they value uniqueness, unlimitedness. They value ethics and ethical behavior. You have seen those graphs here in the course of the day. So this is the projection of mass timber, or a look at what just happened and the exponential curve that we are on. So just going back, so you have seen this before. The point here is, yes, it is increasing by the numbers. So 29 under construction or built, and 44 in design in the state of Washington. And this is a 2020 map. But it's not just the number and the overall spread of those buildings, it's also the height of those buildings. So going from the map here, 2002 to 2005 at the bottom, if you look at green and greener, this is a depiction of tall and taller. And you can see that in places like North America and coming up Australia, of course, those are continents where buildings get exceedingly taller. Green as in more than 6 stories. Some of those projects that are currently in the media on LinkedIn every day that you are familiar with, and just to reiterate, on the left-hand side here, Heinz Canada, the Bayside in Toronto. In the upper middle, this is the Atlasasian, just published, a 35-story hybrid tower in Sydney. It's a $1 billion US investment. 1 billion. Another 1 billion that you have heard of last month was is it called Pmx? The Pmx Tower by Sidewalks Lab, affiliate of Alphabet, affiliate or subsidiary of Google, who is building an entire precinct in wood in Toronto, just being Google. On the lower left-hand side here, we have by PLP, the project, mixed-use project in Rotterdam, 37-story tower in construction. On the right side, in construction, we have the Terrace House by Shigeru Ban, 19 floors, because we're in Vancouver. This is just a snapshot, and it's probably outdated along the lines of what we just discussed as I speak here. However, just to say that the construction sites for those buildings are not the cities that they're placed in, but the construction sites for those buildings, as you all know, happen here. Those are the new construction sites in 2020, off-site construction, design for manufacture and assembly, prefabrication. I have been the lead on a tower here, a 40-story tower, residential tower in Seattle, Washington, a few years back. And this project was an undertaking with Magnus and Klemenchik as the structural engineers, Anderson Construction for cost and constructability, and Arcadis for overall constructability. And what the ask for this project was to validate that we can do constructability, we can do structure and seismic for a place like Seattle for a 40-story tower in mass timber. We have a hybrid construction in the sense that we have a concrete core and everything else in timber and a carbon fiber net as a shear wall extension going out to hold up the building. This project received an AIA Conceptual Honorable Mention in 2017. My company, DLR Group, has just under 500,000 square feet of mass timber projects built. On the left-hand side here is Heinz T3 in Minneapolis. On the right-hand side, Heinz T3 in Atlanta. With that same client, we have currently 6 projects on the boards. This project here is from 2018 and is a mixed-use tower that we have worked as a team together with FasterNet for structure with Swinnerton for cost and constructability, Martha Schwartz and Partners for landscape, Heartland as the underwriter, and of course, Ethan Martin from Woodworks as the consultant for all things wood. And what we were trying to position and to work out here in the market is that we can do with this new code, we can go 12 stories, we can expose wood in the walls, in the ceilings to certain extents. We can organize the building next to Denny Park, Seattle's first public park here in the foreground. The atrium facing north overlooks that park and overlooks South Lake Union. And we can find a way to make this really Seattle, right? We can work with landscape to really create a connection that says, I'm a building from Seattle, and I connect and relate to the people who are around me. The center upper image here is a view from the hotel lounges overlooking South Lake Union. Lower left is the office floor tech rooms, so breakout rooms that are connected to the atrium. And together with FasterNap, we have worked hard to make living trees, or I don't know what the terminology is. Joe Mayo, you can help me out here, but we worked with trees within the building actually as a structural component to hold up the progressively receding atrium floors. On the design side, we don't have very good words for design, so this is just a placeholder to say we took inspiration from furniture making. How do you turn a corner, that finger joint, and imagined how that would turn the building corner, and looked for ideas and inspiration that, again, emphasize the fact that this is not just another concrete box. And we do this, just to reiterate this, because of our 330-300 rule that you all know. 3 stands for the utilities, 30 stands for the rent, and 300 stands for the salary, simplified, per square foot per year. And this is to say that obviously the emphasis is on that salary, on that person, on that human capital. And if we as a collective can agree that timber does all this, then we have a really strong business case in Washington, in Oregon, in Vancouver that we can draw from. In California, this is this last project here in California, I have just come off a study for Tishman Speyer for a pursuit to create a prototype on a site next to the courthouse in Redwood City. And the analysis here initially was what kind of structural system can we imagine, can we dream up with that will work, that will shake out in numbers, and that will produce a functional commercial office type product. And we got excited about the hexagon here, so the carbon molecules and the derivatives of carbon molecules that suggests that there might maybe a rationale in organizing the structure a little bit differently. In colors up here, so at the time that I produced this study, the industry size was 10 feet by 40 feet for CLT, or just a little bit over 40 feet, and progressively this was just to show that 10 by 40 foot panel can be organized with little material wastage to create 20-foot span, column to column modules, submodules that can fit into the overall concept of organizing the office floors. That was my moment of designer walking off with an aspiration and trying to make something happen. And of course, we all know that not always ends that way. So after a long period of review and analysis, we came back to the more straightforward, accepted structural modules and ways to structurally organize the office floors. You can see the building here in this lower image here. So this is the Redwood City Courthouse with the courthouse plaza in front of it, a new pedestrian zone. We worked with Berger Partnership on landscape. We preserved existing cedar trees. And we are creating an arrival, an office worker arrival through the trees, through the green wall, along the water wall, up into your mass timber floors. That was the ask. So, in closing, here is my call to action. As architects, as developers, as philanthropists, as legislators, as engineers and industry affiliates that we all are. The ask is collectively to push design and to push design potential for the better of our health and for the better of our productive society. For 7 million years, we have been wired to wood. We have been wired to recognize natural forms, components, and materials. And as we were wired for those materials, we took a benefit from it. This presentation focused on the psychological and the physiological aspects of the human body. There are other bodies, such as the environment, the planet, right? The organization, the company, my workplace, my place of education or school. The community, my neighborhood. And it just so happens that natural materials such as mass timber fit all five. The value we share are about a future in which we can see ourselves and our children. Thank you. Yes, so we are open for questions. 5 minutes, Lindsay says. Yes.
How did your interviews in the Asian markets go?
So this was pre-corona. I presented first at Zhongxi University in Shanghai last year, and a little bit before that in a city called Jinan in the middle of China at a net zero conference on the topic of mass timber design. And the excitement, the acceptance, and the readiness of China is there. And as I'm saying that, there is a caveat, and the caveat is that China is not known as a forest and timber manufacturing place to build these type of buildings. And what was being shared there is that, yes, they built 6 to 8 story buildings. There was even talk, I met with one engineer who after the presentation came running to me and said, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Susanna, and I'm actually from Bellevue. And I just happen to be here and sitting in, and we are contractors, and we are here in the business too. And remember, this was a jet-lagged presentation in Shanghai at Zhongxi University, where this conversation happened. So, number one, to Ethan's question, we are all over the globe at this point. China is embracing of the methodology and sees value point, sees the cost benefit, even if, and that's what they do, they ship mass timber product from Austria. So they procure all of their material in a 8-week cycle in shipping containers from Europe, and they can still beat the schedule against PT concrete or steel. They can still beat it. that was astonishing. So with all this excitement, of course, there are the precautions that all of us here experience in our daily work as well, and they are real there too. And as you know, currently they have another focus point. So, but we are optimistic that at least for my company, we have a Shanghai office. We're optimistic that will be picking up again. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the Seattle project and what challenges might exist to making that become a reality?
So the Seattle mass timber tower, the model of which is over there. The challenge with this position at this site was that the owner of the site was not ready to sell the land. It was just a very dry-cut real estate decision where they were not ready financially to let go. It is also clear that all of us here in the room have a different bias on the cost and constructability and overall implications on the schedule of this type of construction. But you also all heard Erica Spiritus from Swinnerton speak today, who, with her group, leads the entire Pacific Northwest, or is one of the leaders of structural engineering and design and construction for construction and constructability for these type of buildings. And they are very busy, and they are active in the markets. So are others, and the finding is, so in our experience with the projects that we have built in mass timber, we have rough starts, and we had a learning curve with developers, international developers like Heinz on those projects. We have learned from this. We are constantly optimizing in order to create a value, from a financial value at the end. Without it, it won't work. And we are still on that moving train. Speaking of moving train, I should also tell you that in the spirit of earlier conversations here in the room, just behind me is the Washington State History Museum. I went in there the other day just to look. And there is a kind of the flair of the 1970s or 80s depiction of a scene in a timber mill. And there is a mock-up of an interior drain wagon. The interior drain wagon is all out of wood. The drain wagon awed me, and the timber mill scene that was built in front of us there as visitors gave me pause, because it would be sad if a scene from a timber mill, if the only value that scene finds is in a 1980s museum, and if we cannot pick it up here in Washington State in the Pacific Northwest, where everything is hopping and booming, and we have the clients. So my call for action to extend that includes to take this, yank this mill out of the museum and put it back into places like Aberdeen or Spokane or Riddle or elsewhere in the country, because this is where the future lies for our region anyways.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias.